suffered from collective trauma. This was said by Palestinian psychiatrist and human rights activist Dr. Samah Jabr, who joins us now. You saw her there in that insert. Dr. Samah, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I was really struck by how you are accounting the fact that, you know, there are children who literally live and die under occupation, that is the entire narrative of Palestinian people.
Well, first, thank you very much for having me in your show. And let me express my gratitude for the Thabo Mbeki Foundation for having me in South Africa, and for the revolutionary love and comradeship that they have expressed in receiving me. And yes, I think the question of mental health under occupation and in any colonial system is very important. It impacts all the society. And in Palestine, the WHO data shows that 22.1 of the people are affected psychologically, and they have disorders. But this information, we take it with a grain of salt, because I'm a little bit cautious about labeling any psychological suffering as a disorder. So
and what would be the salient difference, so that we understand, have context to what you're saying?
Because when we talk about a disorder, we are talking about a problem within the individual. And I think the big problem in Palestine is within the context. There is a very oppressive context that makes people suffer. And suffering is the right response to all the violence that is surrounding Palestinians. So, for example, in outside the Palestinian context, if you have a woman who is battered and she suffers, we cannot say she is depressed. We cannot pathologize her experience or medicalize her. It's important to accompany her, to provide her with solidarity, so that she can stand up for her situation and change the reality, be an active agent, and end the violent and aggressive context that is causing her suffering.
And not just, and we'll talk about women and the political system, but and when you look at the Palestinian family, you then also say that at least half of Palestinian men are imprisoned at some point or another in their life. So then you're breaking up the family nucleus, making it even harder for families to survive.
Yes, but the imprisonment of a man, actually 20% of the Palestinian population, which is almost 40% of the male population. This means that in every family there is a change in the structure and in the routine of that family. When a man disappears behind bars, behind prison gates. And even some of these people, when they are liberated, they come back home, but they become shadows of who they were previously, before that experience, because they come out traumatized, frustrated, and they are physically present but psychologically absent.
And what is then the gendered perspective of this, especially on women, how they are then forced to, you know, live under that oppression?
Well, I think that the reality of political violence touches each and every Palestinian, but in different ways. And because women are exposed to double oppression, the oppression of the occupation as Palestinians, but also the structural violence and the dysfunctional system within the Palestinian society that makes women not trusting the usual pathway of seeking help. So if there is a battered woman within a Palestinian home, let's say in a place that is ruled by Israeli police, like Jerusalem, it is difficult for her to go and seek the help because she doesn't trust the system. So in this situation where everyone is affected, women are, the cost for women is doubled in comparison to Palestinian men.
So when you reflect on that social erosion, where does that leave the Palestinian people as a collective in terms of how they identify with what their narrative is?
The social erosion is caused by the fact that when a trauma touches the whole society, when the system is dysfunctional, I think people lose trust in themselves, and they lose trust within the system, and they might internalize a sense of inferiority. When people fail to face and resist to the vertical oppression that is coming from the occupying power, they will express that aggression internally, horizontally, within themselves. And this is why it is important to provide alternatives for people, not to take them as individual patients, but understand that as a collective, Palestinians need to regain their agency. International solidarity and the advocacy of the rights of Palestinians are very important measures that provide a healing value for Palestinians, because they help Palestinians, they validate the experience of Palestinians, they acknowledge their pain, and they help them to regain their capacity to become subjects and stand up for this objectification.
Dr. Jabr, I'd like to look at your own personal circumstances. You've had a very unique upbringing in terms of where you were born, where you went to study, and where you work and live now. And you've accused, at least international media as a whole, of illiteracy of sorts, especially when, portraying the Palestinian story and the plight of Palestinians. How has your own experience helped you shape that?
Well, I wouldn't say that I accuse all international media with illiteracy.
As a body.
I think influential media is complicit, not ignorant about Palestine. And this is part of the power dynamics. This is part of the power game. When a nation is living under colonization, occupation, also part of the deal is that we silence these people. We try to maintain the silence around what is happening to them, and that's why the media is silent about Palestine, or they don't take enough initiative to shed the light, because politics decides what is being said on media. I am from Jerusalem, and the Jerusalem experience is very unique. I had an education outside Palestine, and it is my choice to return to Palestine for work, and to work in the West Bank, where I can serve a vast majority of the Palestinian people. And in addition to my clinical work dealing with individuals, I also write a lot about Palestine, because I want to contribute to this great imbalance in giving a voice for Palestinians.
Having said that, what are your thoughts then about the latest Middle East peace plan? We saw Abu Mazen saying that it means that all tables are off, or all discussions are off the table, and there's no relationship, whether with the US or with Israel.
Well, it is called the peace deal, the deal of the century, and our primitive understanding of a deal is that it has to be between two partners, not imposed by one partner on the other. There is no Palestinian partner in that deal. It's being imposed on Palestinians. And let me use the analogy of a very unfair and awful law that has been used that has been taking place in Palestine until recently. The women of Palestine managed to defeat that law. The law allowed a rapist to be exempted from the punishment if they get married to the victim of rape. And this imposition of a deal on Palestinians when Palestinians don't want that deal, and while the occupation is still going on, and while the annexation of more and more of Palestinian land is still going on, this imposition of a deal is similar to that false marriage contract that was imposed between a rapist and the victim of the rape.
What a jarring image to be left with on that. Thank you so much for sharing your time and thoughts with us. Dr. Samah Jabr is visiting South Africa. Now back to the main story of the day. The Health Department